Well, welcome to another Lighting the Candle, a world that works. I'm Bill Carell, and I'm on here with three of my favorite people in the entire universe, and that would be Lisa Sheehan, also a new friend, Jan Jeremias, and then my old brother from Holy Mount. I can't even remember when we first met, but it seems like at least 7, 8 years ago. Ken Caputo. So, what are we doing here? Well, when we're doing it, we're having conversations to kind of light the world up and get people excited about being alive again in the face of all of the things in the world that don't seem to be working. And so we've got, in my opinion, we have some work cut out for us today because there's a whole lot of things in the world right at the moment that are that fall into that category of it ain't okay. So, with that said, I thought maybe today we could talk about. Um, well, first of all, would y'all just join me in having a moment of silence in honor of friends and family and all the folks over in Europe, not just Ukraine, because this is having a hell of a impact on Russians as well, all of the Europeans, especially the ones that are in border states and everything. Nobody's life is as it was 3 weeks ago. And with that in mind, could we just have a few moments of silence? Okay, folks, when you're hearing this, we were sending all that intentionality to you in particular. You're the one that's listening right now. I can hear your thoughts. Um, we're in different times, but you're there and I'm here, along with these beautiful people. So our intentions and our intentionality is extremely powerful. And being metaphysical beings and our spirits that don't cast a shadow are every bit as important and every bit as real as the bodies that we have that do cast a shadow. So now that I've kind of opened up the box, um, how do we go from being in a situation of um, I'm going to do a little weather reporting here. Most of the folks that I have talked to about in the last 3 or 4 days that have relatives, I have many friends that are Ukrainian in the United States. Um, where I live, and Ken is aware of this as well. We have a very large Ukrainian population here in the greater Willimantic Windham area, throughout Mansfield, etc. Second, third, fourth generation Ukrainians that came over to work in the factories in the 50s and 60s, and they've thrived, and they still are very. Their culture is alive and well in terms of the social aspect. And at the same time, there's a very interesting perspective to be brought here where I don't really experience people who are looking for folks to feel sorry for them in any way, shape, or manner. Quite the opposite. All of the folks that I have talked to are saying things like, we'll prevail. We're going to get through this. Yeah, this is hard, harder than anything we've ever had to do. And our families and the rest of that are all at risk. And we're going to win. And that's with no evidence. You know what I mean? That's like extremely amazing. And I know, Ken, um, lately we've been talking about how the key to really getting the life that you deserve is going to be by overcoming, you know, the obstacles in life and not being um, at the mercy of, it's that old, you want to be the blender or you want to be the frog in the blender. It's always better to be the blender. But in this type of situation where we're really talking the psychology of what it takes for human beings to get out of bed every single morning, and the things that we're seeing, the stories that are being shared, and the inhumanity, I think everyone involved with this is you know, well, I'm going to take a breath in a minute, but we're all hearing different reports and stories. And at the moment, I have a small crew, probably a dozen, 15 different Ukrainians and Baltic nationals that are in the United States now and are either have become naturalized citizens or are dual citizenship or are just here on visas because they own businesses or are building things. Um, that's kind of it. Anybody have some thoughts in terms of how this is striking you in particular? What you've seen, what you've heard?
Well, I think it's heart-wrenching at best. Um, I like to, like they always say, look for the good, um, which is a positive way to look at things. I have my nephew was adopted from Ukraine, so my sister and her husband went there a little over 18 years ago and brought him back. And he's a college freshman now, so he's that age where if you when we ask him when my sister asked him how he felt, kind of gingerly asking the question, and he just typical teenager kind of thing says, "I'm too busy. I don't even know, what to think about it," kind of thing. But
Yeah.
I know on other college campuses because I have a teammate, and we have tea and a conversation every week, and she's a senior at Amherst College, and I know they do a whole bunch of different things because of what's going on in Ukraine. So
Yep.
it's kind of interesting how just from that perspective, from a freshman or from a college student perspective, how it could be so different. For one little point,
Thank you.
come on, Ken.
I it's been an interesting reflection on being human in all of its you know it's devastation and inspiration, and you see that, I mean, there are just as many stories of, horrific things as there are inspirational things, and that's, you know it's kind of funny how question I keep asking is when will it all create the fertile ground for an actual evolutionary step? So like if you were to study ancient Rome and 2000 years ago and the politics and the things that were done, it is exactly like it is today. Globally, there's really not been any change in people's relationship to power, and some abuse it and some don't, and some people are more we conscious and some do very selfish things, and so there really hasn't been any change. And I live in this world of eternal optimism that the resistance that's created and the obstacles that we are navigating will in some way elevate us as a species on the other side. So so there's a lot of heart, in all of it, and it's an interesting roller coaster because you hear one thing and it's an act of bravery or passion and up you go, and then you hear something horrific and down you go, and and it's all just inextricably linked to being human.
I think I've been hearing a lot about from friends that really are asking people to get at least here to get involved, whether that's, where the people I know are, coming from is like how much awareness or how much, um, financially to get involved or to donate. So that's where I hear it. And I think that, like Lisa said, I always try to think of something positive that might come. And I think that the only thing that kept on coming to my mind is, especially in this country, could this be a way for people to unite once again? And I was reminded of different situations. I mean, especially because I was in the city after 9/11, and because I worked for the city at that time. And the fact that people were hugging people they didn't know, it was just like this real unifying force that kind of brought people together. And that's what I keep on thinking about, this is, could this be finally something that not only unites this country, which I feel needs it, but unites everyone?
I think that's a marvelous question. And as difficult it is and if you're listening to this, you can hear this is a hard topic for us to embrace and talk about. We can't do it freely or with the fluidity that we would if we were describing a UConn basketball game or something of that nature. This is one of those things that is just extremely difficult, to be with, like a failure to be in the moment of knowing that there are people in the world, and there always are people in the world that are having a bad time and being taken advantage. As Ken said, we're getting a lot of emphasis focused on this. We have a middle class country. Ukraine is not a poor country by any stretch of the imagination. These people are like you and me, sitting in our living rooms today, putting our posts on Facebook. They were doing that 3 weeks ago. Fat, dumb, and happy. And then all of a sudden, they have to go to the street. They have to gather up. And in many cases, they didn't bring their pets. They didn't bring any of the valuables. They got out of their home with their lives and their loved ones. And then just on the faith of we're strong people, we'll get where we're going to go. It's a remarkable set of circumstances. I can't picture any of us making up a story like this. It's just so outside the bounds of what people would expect, intend, want, or absolutely be a party to creating. So, agreed. Would they say the cauldron of failure, the cauldron of abject inability to cope, or in that complete moment of despair, that's what creates the next opportunity to kind of rise and move on to a different plane. And wouldn't it be great if one of the outcomes of this is that we're all kind of fed up with the nonsense and we just don't have any room for it anymore in our lives, with people having silly disagreements over things that really don't matter? From the standpoint of having arguments for the sake of having arguments, it seems like those conversations that went on 2-3 weeks ago, where people were arguing politics or ideology or just about anything really, wherever any of those arguments were that were more about making a point and less about making the world a better place, you know is it time that in some space that we're going to create here, that something new will rise up, and it will be the kind of thing that kind of shapes the growth of human beings in a different direction again? Or will the culture that's been somewhat similar, as Ken says, going all the way back to Rome and Greece and the Phoenicians and Persians and all of, where it just gets swallowed back up again and is now just part of what happened, like 9/11. During 9/11, there were so many people, everyone lost somebody that they knew or had part of their family. Everyone had someone who it was an impact to them, and we all could experience that in a very personal and visceral fashion. This is that sort of thing again, because these folks are talking into their cameras and they're broadcasting, to the internet, to Instagram, to Facebook, to any news organization that will pick it up. And it just reminds me of, and I think we're all of the age where Vietnam was on TV every single night. That was the first time that the American people as a culture had to experience what war really was. With the embedded reporters were coming on the news every single night and showing us pictures of what had happened that day. And the answer to it was, no, we're not going to stand for this anymore. And it didn't end well for pretty much anybody, but it ended, didn't it? And there was a long period of time, I say that almost everybody said, no, we're just not doing war anymore. This war's not the thing that we do. So I don't know, what's next?
But you
Well,
forget too,
it's
there's that expression about the, I think it's I want to say it's a Chinese expression about when you have a comfortable pair of shoes, you just walk. You forget you're even wearing them until you wear them out, and then you recognize it. So, so sometimes when you're talking about certain ideals and ways that we've lived over the last few decades, you just get comfortable with what you have and you don't notice it anymore. It's like, being comfortable with youth or health until it's taken away. And then it's like, oh, now you're looking back, and of course, who are you going to be in that moment? Are you going to blame the healthcare system or blame someone else, or are you going to blame yourself, or are you going to find, the space within yourself for compassion and kindness and, you know, and some type of tender attention? So, so it's interesting. I remember I was running my dojo when 9/11 happened, and the thing we all committed to was really the smiling eyes practice.
Yeah.
Just put a smile in your eyes. It's 10% more than everyone you meet. And even if you can't directly, you know, I mean, like I gave blood to help, and there were things you could do directly, but more importantly, it's just what part of your light, of your candle, can shine to, unasked, without any consideration for how it will come back to you, can you pass on? Regardless of, just is just that reminder of that, and that's what I find myself with everything that's been happening. It's just taking that extra moment to thank the person that bagged the groceries, or, just the little things you do consistently day in and day out that can change a planet.
Mhm.
I like seeing the massive gatherings throughout the world.
Mm.
That kind of gives me a little bit more hope that people are standing together against or for peace. Is rather have, like Mother Teresa said, I want to attend an anti-war rally, but do a peace rally and I'll be there. Um, so and all the, like they said, like look for the good. So all the things that the surrounding countries are doing. The mothers in Poland leaving strollers on the train platforms for the mothers that had to leave without them. That kind of thing. Or one cool thing I saw, and hopefully it doesn't get ruined, but that you could buy Airbnb spots in Ukraine and surrounding countries
Yeah, yeah,
where,
that's cool.
yeah, so that people, and somebody wrote back saying that they were already housing refugees for nothing, so this was helping them a lot. So like just all those little things that people are sharing to help out and look for the good again. I was watching or listening to he's a neuroscientist actually, and was doing studies on gratitude, and like like to turn it on its head. They did studies where people watching other people receive something and then be grateful for it has a bigger impact on you. Like to receive gratitude is almost more important than to acknowledge it. So it's kind of a cool. So that's what we can see. In my mind now, what we can see a lot of right now is just appreciate that sort of thing that's going on, but from one human to another, from one group to another, that's trying to aid people instead of, I look at the cameras and I just see bombs going. I go, like all I could think of is like simply put, war is stupid.
Mm.
You could think of a better thing to say about it. It doesn't
Yeah.
even make sense. How do you blow up buildings and people and I don't know. So I
It's a
looked
hell
at
of a temper tantrum, isn't it?
something, I don't know.
I mean, seriously?
Yeah.
That was a beautiful country. I mean, unbelievably clean with a we know it now. We've experienced their esprit de corps, their nationalist spirit. And the fact that no, they're not part of Russia. They really are not part of Russia. And the Russians know that. Guess what? Like 25% of the population of Ukraine are first generation Russians. So the long and the short of it is we get to see some pretty amazing stuff. And some of the things that I saw with the way that the Russian troops behaved, the story that I heard about the Russian troops that were puncturing the gas tanks on their trucks, their own trucks, so that they would not be able to get to a place where they would be called upon to kill Ukrainians. Clearly, this isn't one that anybody wanted. And it's a very, very sad state for us to be in, but we're here, and this is a high cost for the for man to pay. And let's get the benefit out of it. Let's get the lesson. Let's get the good.
Yeah, I had an interesting conversation not that long ago with someone I'm working with who's very tied into the global Buddhist community. And it was kind of funny because we were talking about even in like something that's supposed to bring you kind of enlightenment and balance and all that, there's a lot of ego and politics that play out. And, it's just so human. And we're, he was talking about just this interesting conversation about you hear mindfulness spoken about a lot in within Western cultures now, and that's one of the things that I teach even to school age kids, and just breath and awareness. And he was saying that somewhere along the lines the Buddhist community is talking about the other side of that that did not get translated, which was the cultivation of compassion, intentionally developing compassion. And to me, when you have an absence of compassion, war makes sense because you're not seeing other humans. You're just seeing, you're not seeing them as someone like you. You can't see the world through their place, through their eyes. And, I think we see a lot of that in the polarization within our own country. Someone who has a different belief system from you, you don't have any compassion from them. They don't deserve that. They deserve to be ruined or put down or isolated or get out. You don't even deserve to live here, all that kind of stuff. So, so is that, I always think, what is the core that you could cultivate that would dissolve the stuff that we're seeing that's so, just horrific for all of us, so maybe that's something that should be more of a focus. How do you inspire, encourage, and express gratitude for the cultivation of compassion in your everyday life?
Jan, it looks like you've got something that's coming.
Yeah, I was thinking that, I don't really even think of that as compassion. I think of it as cultivating tolerance. I think that we live in a very intolerant society. Nobody is tolerant of people with other opinions or other views, and so that's what I think about, is how can I sit with somebody who's of different views. And I spend a lot of time with that, like lately, especially, being in meetings or being in one-on-one conversations with people who are like so like have such differing opinions to what I believe, and how can I be okay with that? And I think it kind of just, I don't know, for me, I kind of break it down into the physicality, their body, they breathe, like getting back down to the basics of who they are, uh, without all the other stuff. So they have a spirit, however you want to label that spirit. a soul. They breathe, they're physical, they bleed, you know, that kind of things. I kind of try to really break it down. And then hopefully all the other stuff just kind of falls away because you realize that that's just almost insignificant.
Well, that's a good question. What would be the circumstances that would trigger your ability to be tolerant? Like, it's kind of like you can't tell someone calm down,
Well,
'cause
okay.
so telling
Like
someone
telling someone
have
to sleep,
yeah,
All right.
exactly. So
I,
like you can't just say have tolerance.
this is
So
urgent. Hang on 1 second, okay? You cannot try to survive a conversation and expect for it to work. Being tolerant means I am going to listen in such a way that I'm going to hear things that will not change me. It's wrong. If you listen with love, there's no domain of tolerance. It's 100% acceptance. Now, you don't have to take it on and agree with it, but when you're interested in listening through your beliefs, then your level of tolerance is going to be something you're listening to as opposed to who's speaking and what their intention is. And that leaves out the whole level of you and I are both human beings. And I'm thankful that you're here spending this time with me. So I want to put that in right now to say where we are in every time people go to war, neither one of them's wrong. They don't get up from their dinner table to go pick up arms, get into tanks, and drive someplace to kill people because they think they're wrong. Now, they may be doing that in this case because if they don't do it, then their loved ones are going to be at risk in Russia, which I'm sure there's a lot of that going on right now. But what I'm saying to you is that there's a fundamental way that human beings can interact with each other. And if I said what I said to me and it sounded like I was making you wrong, that's not where I was going. I want to elevate this right now. People try too much to survive conversations and be the person they were before the conversation started. That's not living, in my opinion. The living is being able to take things on critically and then understand it and ask questions until you actually do get what people are saying. Do you know what I mean? So the word tolerance was a red flag for this poll. And that was me not listening to what you were saying or how you were meaning it, so I could really demonstrate to you, just how strong that can be. And the whole point is that the domination, as I did to take over control of the speaking right now, is exactly where love needs to take the place of whatever it was we were talking about. Does that make sense? If you listen to a small child, how much of you is judging what that small child is saying? And how much of you is just appreciating and loving who they're being while they're saying whatever it is they're saying? So, for example, how would it be if we listened to each other that way? How much room would we have for other people to make mistakes, for ourselves to make mistakes? And yet we do get trained to survive, don't we? That our beliefs are the things that we die for. They're the things that we do to end other people's existences. And yet, where did we get our beliefs? Am I off base here? We don't typically vote on what we believe, by the way, do we?
Well, I think, your beliefs can evolve based on, based on your exposure and openness to new information and changing conditions. So I know I had a lot of beliefs when I was younger that over time kind of shifted as I learned more. It's kind of funny. I'll give you like a really simple one. There's always like things going around about you can learn a lot about someone by what they do with a shopping cart. And like, do they put the shopping cart away or do they leave it by their car?
Right.
I was thinking back to my learned environment was leave the shopping cart because someone's job is to put it away. So, so I kind of went through a period of my life where I left the shopping cart because that was going to be someone's job and I don't want to do their job for them. I want them to do their job. So that was a learned belief. And then over time, that evolved, to where actually my favorite thing to do is find spaces to park my car near where the shopping carts go because I don't have to walk as far to put it away. But I always put it away, and that was a shift in belief where I was just open to seeing things differently. And I was in an environment that allowed that. So, so how often do you have someone that they grew up in the same town, they're surrounded by same people with certain values, and they stayed there? That's
Yes.
going to have a dramatic influence on their beliefs. Whereas someone who leaves and goes to a new environment that's different, now either they're going to be closed to that and they're going to leave and go back to where they're comfortable, or they're going to be open and things are going to change. It can be fluid, you know. But the other thing that struck me as you were talking, Bill, was like in business, we learned pretty early on that controlling the environment and expecting people to do the right thing was exhausting and rarely worked. And
Correct.
all we could do is try to design an environment that made it easier for them to make the right choice. So, right now, there are many people who don't see other humans as equal to them in their humanity. They see them as less than human. And love, in and of itself, I question whether that actually will change that. How do you create a design that allows love to flow in a way where it's easier for them to start seeing that other person as human? That's what I would
Interesting.
be curious about.
Right. But here you are trying to use it. Okay. And that is the first, you know, canard. Okay. That is the first red herring. That is the first. You can't use love.
Oh, no, no, no. I'm not
Love
saying
isn't
no, no, no,
useful.
no.
Okay.
Dissolve the
But hang on.
resistance. Love
I'm
is already there,
well.
right?
No, it's either
Love is
present
already
or it
there.
is. You're
Huh?
you're either experiencing love or you're missing it. Those are
It's
the two
always
ways.
there. I would disagree with that. It's always there. It's just that we become disconnected from it. It's always there. So what I'm saying is it's hard to experience love when someone's torturing you, right? And so maybe you can evolve yourself to where you can because the love is there, and some people maybe could. So what I'm saying is there a design? Is there a way we can communicate or interact as a society where the barriers between us and that love are reduced?
So here's the thing. There isn't love. There's no such thing as love, okay? Love does not exist until it's distinguished in a conversation. Here's what you and I, have to agree upon. You will not experience love until someone presents it. You can be the person who presents it or someone else can, but a possibility, is only in existence in the moment it's being spoken, which is why people need to be trained to come from a particular style of speaking which honors people, as opposed to trying to thingify them, like the names that we give people for being this kind of ist or that kind of ist or whatever, so that we can put them into groups and we can deal with that's how those people are, and we know nothing about them. We don't even know any more about ourselves, because while we're describing people, and while again, I'm going to come back because I love the word tolerance. Okay, Jan, I want to just acknowledge that right now, because tolerance is the first step in terms of being able to risk loving somebody. You cannot express or experience love in a situation where you are intolerant of that other human being. And as Ken said, where you regard them as less than, or you regard them as not human. And yet, how many of our conversations do we listen to where people are calling other people that they've never met or talked to names?
I wanted to go back to belief for a moment because
Sure.
I do agree with Ken, but I think there are certain beliefs which are almost inherent in your nature.
Hmm.
And I look to myself and different experiences and what I chose to do, with my life and who I decided that I was going to hang around with and affiliate myself with. And that was just based on this inherent feeling that I had of, you know, acceptance. I mean, I grew up in a very Orthodox Jewish family, which was very non accepting of others. And I left that. And that just seemed wrong from the time I was probably, really, really young. It just didn't sit right with me.
Yep.
I'm like, doesn't matter to me. A person is just a person. And I think it was, for me, that was just inherent in who I was. Like, no one told it to me. No one ever said anything to me or whatever. It was just like, I can't be like this.
That's a great choice. And at some point, it just inside of you, something broke, didn't it? And it was just not okay with you any longer.
Oh, yeah. It got to the point where, as much as I wanted to fit in, quote unquote, I felt like I was dying, basically. Like that
Yep.
was like my soul was going to die because it just wasn't who I was. And I do believe Ken, but I do agree with Ken on certain points also. I do think some of it is learned over time and different experiences and your ability to stay open to people.
And I think that's what's going on with all the events too, because I like some cultural and other beliefs that you're might be completely unaware of. Your biases that you weren't even aware of, and because of what's been happening in the past couple of years, have become blatantly clear to me, and basically broke my heart open. And I didn't even know it was shut to those things. I had no idea. So I think, it's like to find the good. I think that's some good aspects because I know it's not just happening to me. I know it's happening all over the world that these certain international happenings are, no, they're becoming international happenings because people are seeing them through the eyes of compassion or through the eyes of love, or suddenly open up more to those two things.
And that's an important piece of chemistry. The elements have to be present in order for them to cause an effect. And although, Ken, I could argue that you're 100% right, there's always love, or whatever we're talking about, I can argue, 100%. And yet at the same time, most of us don't live that way. Why do we need to be tolerant of anyone? Because we're pretty sure they don't agree with us, first of all. And what if they do? Or what if they do up to a degree? Or what if they do until we hear that thing that we shouldn't be tolerant of? Or so the argument here that I'm posing is, as you and I are going through our day, it's perfectly fine to be happy with the existence that we have. And then someone comes along, like Mike Tyson says, everyone's got a plan till someone punches you in the face. So now the question is, who are you going to be when that happens? Because the things that you cannot be with, that you would predict, that would happen in a conversation, they kind of do happen the way that you predict that they're going to happen. Sooner or later, you hear something that's exactly the way that you had intended it. So if we were going to be like alchemists for a world that works, I'm just saying that the gold standard is going to be two things. I love you and I appreciate you. And until I tell you that, you don't know. that's this nature of when people are being called names and being dehumanized in a conversation, is love present or is love absent? And what does it take to flip that whole script and all of a sudden be in the middle of where people are calling each other names and they're not talking? And some crackpot fool hollers out, "Is there anything you can agree on?" And that, you hear people, "See, I cut me, I cut you, we both bleed." That much we can agree on, right? Um, we both are for something. What are you for? So I think the interesting part of all of this is out of the 40 million Ukrainians, I'm going to tell you, every last one of them had an inhumane side. And every last one of them had a side that was created by humanity. And there aren't any two of those 40 million or however many that are exactly the same. Every last single one of them is united by something that they call themselves. I too am a Ukrainian. Beyond that, we don't know much about the individuals, do we? Except for they're probably going to be a lot like you and me. And why would we if we had a choice to create a system, Ken, and that system were going to be built on what works in the world, what would we arm the folks that are going to work in that system with? What would we give them for tools? What would be the training strategy to prepare them for those moments when they get punched in the face?
It's a very good question.
I think we got some room to do some things in that area. I don't know that we're doing an awful lot to create human beings that can withstand, the put downs or the potential, nasty speech or whatever it is. And what if we all were able to just stand up on our hind legs and laugh?
Well,
You silly,
you,
you
you know what's
silly
interesting?
goose. That's what you believe? All right, good for you.
Yeah, I guess, I think it does. Um, like here's just a kind of a simple example. What parent doesn't at some point have a teenager attack them with hurtful words? And they have to deal with that, and somehow they continue to express love, and for most parents, they find a way to forgive, and eventually, the kids come back when they have kids usually and say, "Wow, I can't believe," you know, but that was just where they were in that place. So, so I think we all have that capacity. And again, I don't know, I'm going to hold my ground in a personal belief that there's a flow of love like a river, and sometimes we're just disconnected from it, or we're just dipping our toe, or we're drowning in it, and it's really just a matter of, it's not that it goes away, it's just our level of separation from that flow that can have consequences. And and you're right, I mean, as a martial artist, you can defend yourself from a place of love and break someone's arm because they're trying to stab you with a knife, but not from a place of hatred or anger. It's just actually from a place of sadness and compassion that they've reached a point where they've forced you to reflect that level of violence back on them because you just choose not to accept the harm that they're directing towards you.
Sure.
And and I remember my mentor saying to me, a lot of times when you defend yourself, you're kind of judge, jury, and executioner. It's a lot of responsibility, because if someone calls you a name and you break their arm, you sentence them to however many months in a cast for simply, providing an insult. Like that kind of thing. So you have a responsibility to mirror back something that's appropriate, with the hope that maybe, whatever they receive due to their own actions, maybe there will be a learning experience for them. But you don't let them attack you. You reflect. You don't even defend yourself. You reflect it back at them. Is kind of the way he would explain it.
So
So
you're describing a system where
yeah,
somebody's gone through rigorous training to be in that mindset, and even in the moment where they don't actually remember, I'm coming. I'm. No one ever stops and goes, "Okay, you're hitting me in the face. I guess I'll come from sadness and compassion now and kick your ass." It's almost always going to be that there's the person who could kill someone with one stroke, a lethal blow to the side of the throat and break their neck, or chooses in the moment to just disable them and break their arm. Like the lesser and the training, the compassion, the love that was built there, the free flowing love that they've experienced throughout their mindset training in terms of why are you in martial arts in the first place. My favorite Miyagi quote is, object of karate not to hit, Daniel-san, object of karate to not get hit, you
hmm
know? And so when you're thinking in terms of other human beings, you have to be completely compassionate with yourself first. You know, that that whole idea of who you are and who you're going to be, it's an abject failure, for people who go their whole life studying. It's like, for instance, the Dalai Lama. One of my favorite sayings that he has is that one of the greatest failures for him in his life is to become angry. Totally human response, right? But this is a human being whose entire gift to the world is to be the holder and the generator for the entire population of the world, for going on 8 billion people of love and peace and, you know workability and all that stuff. So it, he laughs when he says it. The greatest single failure is when I become angry. He's lost control of his ability to presence love in that moment. And he's got no, Buddhists, they're crazy people, okay? They believe that they can chant and that they can pray and that they can cause something to happen a half a world away. Or they can sit at a gas pump like they did several times in the 1970s. And in protest to how things are going in the world, they do something unthinkable for most human beings. But that self sacrifice in that moment is to interrupt what the rest of us are doing. And sometimes it has to go to that level, sometimes, right?
hmm
So the model of, are we always in love and we get disconnected from it? And funny enough, I would say any of the beliefs that I have, that I have to hear you say something, or Jan, I have to hear you say something, and the word tolerance today hits me in a completely different way than it might have yesterday or will next week. What you did for me was you demonstrated to me, like what an opinionated asshole I am.
we
And
all
I,
have gusts of that at times.
and I get to unconceal that for a moment. And guess what? I didn't die, did I?
Nope.
Or did we?
Yeah. So if we all lightened up just a little bit, I have this really remarkable friend. I'm going to say his name. It's just Eric Dobby. You don't know Eric. Jan, there's a good possibility you'll probably get to meet him with the networking that you're doing. But he has he said over and over and over again the two fundamental things that all human beings have to remember and focus are: I am thankful and I appreciate. I appreciate you. I appreciate this. I appreciate all of it. And I love. I love you. I love this. I love all of it. And that people who work out and create a body that is up to any task that comes up out on the streets, who start out every day being thankful for having woken up into a life that they love, they've got an edge over people that don't think that way. And that's kind of an interesting belief system in my book. And the neat thing about belief systems is they're very personal. We may even say that we share a belief system with somebody else, but on further examination, the more that we line up all the facts and we compare, what we really think about them, some we do and some we don't in almost any subject area. So what if I just love the crap out of you, Jan? And what if I just said, I appreciate you, and you don't have to do a darn thing to earn that?
She's thinking.
No, not at all. I'm not really thinking. I'm just, imagining what that would be like.
Yeah.
Well, just saying it made me feel pretty damn cool, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, and I'm just feeling it, which is why I wasn't thinking. I was just like feeling
Right.
it and saying, okay, okay, great. Takes the pressure off, obviously. There's this cohesiveness to existence.
It's almost like the question becomes, we've had all this time in this culture, going back to the Romans to borrow, Ken's statement from earlier, without really growing very much. And that's, in my opinion, the language of things. Things acting on things. How would people engage with each other? How would human beings behave and speak to each other? And not just the ones that have earned your trust, not just the ones that you have, through experience, learned are safe to take chances and be risky with. How would people behave with people differently coming out of this whole thing? Where's the good? Where's the gold?
Well, it will always be interesting. Actually, my favorite unconfirmed Dalai Lama quote was a reporter asking him, "Are you enlightened?" And he looked back and said, "Not at the moment." I thought that was like so eloquent and beautiful, just as this reminder, I'm just like you, and it isn't a permanent state. I'm sure, although he aspires to not experience anger, he still does because he's human, you know? So, and then it's just recognizing it and cultivating appropriate responses instead of being in a state of reaction,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what I was thinking about when you were describing, Ken, about hitting someone, is this whole
Mm.
idea of being in, I don't necessarily like the word control, but I guess just being aware of what you're saying and what you're doing and how you're responding. Like, what is your response? So when you think about hitting somebody, if you would take that into normal life, like, do you pause before you actually respond to somebody? Like, do you listen and then pause before you automatically, for me, do I pause when I send an email or a text, which
Mhm.
is very, almost, especially in our society, is like, how fast can I respond?
Mhm.
is much more an issue as to what we're responding.
You know, the other thing that's interesting is you say that is like, I think if more people kind of thought like an athlete, like when you have a less than skillful reaction or response, you you practice getting better at it. You know, like that's, and even as a martial artist, I mean, if you get hit, it's not the other, either they were more skillful than you were or you were less skillful than they were, but it's just feedback. And now if it matters to you, you go and respond. So like I know when I was younger, I had a temper and I'd snap at people really easily, and at some point decided I didn't want to be like that anymore. I didn't like who I was. So I didn't just magically stop. I would I would reframe experiences that I had where I wasn't as skillful as I wanted to be, and I imagined how I could have done it better and practice doing it better the next time. And so how many times do we don't really think intentionally about it. So so we're reacting in situations and we just keep reacting because we don't stop and say, wait a minute, maybe I could learn to take 3 breaths before sending the email back or what. So you just keep doing the same pattern.
Well, that's what I had somebody say to me a long time ago, and I still do this to this day. It was many, many years ago that if somebody sends you an email that kind of like, rubs you the long way or something, is
Mm,
I might write it, but that's the gift of pushing the button send, is you do not have to send it right away.
yeah.
So I'll usually hold it till like, till the next day or much later in the day and reread it and see if I would have reframed it or rephrased it differently than originally I was going to, how I responded. And I think that that's the gift. I mean,
Mm,
in a way, we're not in a situation, thankfully, where we have to hit somebody necessarily.
hmm
So you don't need to necessarily say everything that we're thinking and comes out of our mouth or react that way.
hmm
Same thing with email and text, which is what I love because you can train yourself to sit there and say, okay, I'm going to pause.
It's funny too. I remember having a conversation with someone about that a couple of years ago, and it had never occurred to them, like that they didn't have to just respond and hit send. That was just what they did. And they had to sit with it and then retrain themselves to do what you're saying. And it wasn't easy. So again, it was like, now you're back into, they were moving through the world as best they could based on what they knew until someone else offered something that they hadn't thought of previously and they were open to it, and it was challenging, so they had to practice it, and improve it slowly over time. So how much, Bill, emphasis is there on that idea of intention, practice, and not magically just being better at something, but having to do this, the hard work.
Well, see,
you know
see the whole thing about being a human being is we have 80,000 plus or minus thoughts a day. Most of them are not our most inspired thinking. And some of them actually have this mechanism called a trigger, where there's a response that you don't have a choice to react to. And most people who would have that trigger occur in reading an email from somebody or a text or a tweet, 140 characters. Yeah, you can say some pretty awful things in 140 characters. And then you hit that go, and then you feel horrible afterwards, you know? And then there's another consequence afterwards. But most people don't get the joy of experiencing the consequence. They only get the bad feeling or the good feeling. Like Edith Bunker used to say, all. For you. But the point is, why don't you pick up the telephone and say, these words are emotionally charged the way that I'm reading them, and I want to make sure that this is what you meant, by on the printed page, because emails and texts are not great at expressing emotion. How about I just start this forest fire another day and I'll ask you, what's on your mind? And out of a million people, you know how many people that occurs to? No way. I got to get even with this sucker, you know? You Democrat, you're all the same, you know? I think it's really laughable. But there we go. We name something, we now know what it is. It's the enemy, and we're not that. Or you could say, what do you mean by that, Ken?
I think it's interesting. I read an article, it was in a psychology journal, and it was talking about a lot of times, like it's it gives you a feeling of control in your own life if there can be a them, and actually, like a lot of conspiracy theories, it's the same thing. These are complicated things that don't have simple solutions, and our brains naturally try to find a simple way to view it so we feel in control of it again because it sends us into such a crisis in our own lives. So you wonder if, because I mean, it's funny, like you can say I love you to someone and they don't have to say it back. They can be like, the heck with you, they could continue to attack. So now, doesn't matter, you could be, not everybody loves the Dalai Lama, no matter how much he loves them.
And I
So,
don't get that,
so
but I agree with you. Not everybody does.
yeah, so it's kind of interesting, and I think that's why this is all so difficult because, I know I've been in negotiations where it's like, look, I don't want you to take an advantage of, but I don't want you to take advantage of me, and they're like, too bad. I want mine, and I don't really care if you get yours. So, and that is their position, and you're not gonna you're not gonna warm and fuzzy your way out of it. It's just, so now you gotta figure out what you're gonna do with that, and it's probably gonna be an imperfect solution that's not gonna lead to goodwill necessarily.
And see, that's the whole deal about having strategies with things, right? Things typically are of a particular size, weight, color, taste, and they persist through time very close to what they were. Ice cubes are different, bananas are different, but a rock or a brick, or a painting, something that is fixed and is a thing, you can count on that being close to what it looked like a year ago, a year from now. Human beings are not things. Our bodies are
Mhm.
things, but even those don't stay the same for weeks and months at a time. So, this is where kind of a low level reprogramming of how human beings behave with each other, that the domain of interacting with each other as things, I don't know that it's working out real well. And the strategy of winning and the strategy of being engaged with a thing that you can actually beat, either with the words that you use and you hit the send button, or you pick the phone up and you find out what that thing is thinking on the other end of the phone line until they start to turn into a human being in the conversation. Yeah, I don't know. I just really feel there's a coldness and an emptiness inside watching human beings struggle just to stay alive on the television set every day for the last 2.5 weeks in a way that we don't get to see, and nor should we have to see. But can you imagine if all of us just decided, I'm going to get better? The old saying of we really suck at being human beings.
We're all human, and sometimes we suck at it. Yeah.
But, and how many times do we say, I think I'm going to work at being better at this? And then what would that look like?
And all I could think, because we've talked about it before, like Ken's talked about it. I mean, physically and emotionally, you raise your set point. So, you can learn something new all the time, and all of a sudden, you're like, to use Jan's word too, a little more tolerant of things in your own head, in your own body, and then you could go to the next level. But that's like one way for people to start exercising their ability to learn new steps, including like Jan was talking about and Ken about, because we call it save as draft process. You don't hit send. You use that save as draft feature.
Powerful tool.
Mhm.
Powerful
Yeah, I've
tool.
been playing with that idea of spilling over, and I've asked a lot of people, like, what would you fill yourself up with to the point where you couldn't contain it anymore and it spilled over into the people around you without it taking anything away from you, so it wasn't a depletion. And it's been fascinating how different all the answers are. I mean, you talk about what winning looks like, Bill. For some it was wealth, so that they had more wealth than they needed so that they could, take care of their kids or extended family, or, build new things or help interstate, that kind of thing. For
Yeah.
one, it was laughter, because they want to be a comedian. So they're like, the more ridiculous they feel in their own life, the more that spills out of them and just makes other people laugh and smile. It was like this huge array, from things to like feelings, or it was everything. And it was just uh, not really, I don't really have any point with saying it. It was just interesting, just watching how people react when you think intentionally cultivating something within yourself to the point where you can no longer contain it and spills out of you, you know? Very different answers. It was kind of fun.
Well, I think you're pointing to something that many of us know and understand, that the beginning of all change out there starts in here.
Mhm.
And to the
Yeah, yeah.
degree that we remember that we want a better out there, that starts with change in here. First of all, remembering that. Then second of all, getting, through the hard and clunky feelings of being awkward at it. And then, the part where you can't tell if how you're being is making any difference out there at all. So this is where we start to maybe change our clan a little bit and hang out with some different people. But at the same time, we're here on a weekly basis, unless we're sick for a couple of weeks. um, every week we have a conversation where all of us can say whatever's on our mind and on our heart. And at the end of the conversation, I'm never the same guy that sat down in the beginning. And it's my intention to not be that guy. And I'm willing to take whatever that is. Sometimes we finish these conversations and I'm scratching my head for a while afterwards. And I'm left with something like, okay, there's action to be taken. And I don't know what that action is. And that discomfort of living with that period of time where something's called for here, but I don't know what. That's that for me is like where the Dalai Lama finds himself in that instance between being angry and then recalling that his reason to be on the earth in the first place is to be the vessel of love for humanity. You know, how many of us sit down and decide what our purpose is and where we're going on a daily basis? Or how many of us get lined up somewhere and get told where to go and how to think and what to do and not question it? At least not question it in a powerful way that makes a difference. So, can I let you in on a little secret? Every once in a while, I go on Facebook and I post something just to take the temperature of what's going on out there. And I will say something that has a double entendre just to see who responds to it and what their responses are. And I I have to tell you that most of the time what I get are not people that are gifted in the not hitting the send button. And in fact, they're not even interested in that. They're like tripping all over themselves, like, how fast can I get this out? That scene where uh, what's his name? Who wants to get the Red Rider Daisy B gun? He's writing his theme paper, and he can't get the words out fast enough, you know? And then he goes through the line and Santa says, "What do you want?" And he says, he freezes. And then Santa says, "A football?" He goes, "Yeah, a football." Well, we started off with a moment of silence, and I would invite you to share a moment of joy, something in your life that may have happened recently, or something that you're particularly joyful about. And I'm happy to lead off, but I'm not going to. And I would like to give the floor to Jan because you were the first one to light up. That'll teach you.
Yeah, definitely will teach me. I don't like putting you on the spot. Um, Joyful. I always think of my animals when I think joy because they just are, always have been and always are my joy. So, I think probably my dog just, cracks me up. Like
Yeah.
he's just really funny. And I always think, okay, that gives me such joy, personal joy, you know, spending time with him, being, so I just love him.
I've spent a little time with him too, and he is lovable, no doubt about it. It's been virtual. I can't even imagine what it would be like to get a big sloppy kiss from him.
Yeah, he's great.
Lisa, shall we just go right around the horn?
Sure. I recently discovered that my niece also is taking up the ukulele. So I had her over for dinner last Friday, and I told her to bring her ukulele. So we just spent hours together, just enjoying good food and not good music, because we're both
Having
both
fun, right? Yeah, I can tell you didn't enjoy that at all.
So I loved it. It was very joyful.
Good for you. Thank you. Mr. Ken.
Well, lately, actually, I have an interesting relationship with joy. Remind me, I'll tell you a story, what I learned about it. Um, but lately, it's really been the moment when I recognize I'm awake. Like I woke up and there's another day, and then all the things, not even the things, the fact that you're awake and conscious and have what becomes possible out in front of you. It's like that. I don't know. Just find joy in that moment.
Cool.
I love it, my friend.
Well, it's an interesting thing. Like I learned this from John to actually practice noticing the moment when you recognize you're awake, because you're usually awake before you notice it. So when does it enter your consciousness that you're awake? And it's like it can become a set point for your whole day. It's really kind of cool. You know, I didn't used to pay attention to that, and I found that it's been very helpful too. So,
Yeah.
And I have one mechanical question for you. How do you remember to notice when you're awake?
um, it it's how I go to sleep. So, and it's almost, I guess you could say, setting an intention, but not really. It's just as you're drifting off, um, staying curious to if you'll wake up and when. And so it's just kind of almost like, drifting out of consciousness with the question in place. And what I found was it was just like anything else over time. Like most days I'd forget and wouldn't realize it until I was moving. And then over time, it just became just sort of a more natural habit. And there's a breathing that I do that goes with it. I do a little bridge breathing when I do notice it. So that helped, I think, create like a physiological trigger to to kind of anchor me in the experience. So yeah.
It kind of sounds like there's no wrong way to do it.
No,
When
no,
you
no.
notice you're awake. That's joyful.
Yeah, yeah, and just, and I guess, the interesting thing is when I reflected back on it, there are a lot of times, and I'm sure we've all had that, where you dreaded waking up because of where you were framing what that meant and who you're going to need to be and what was going to happen, and especially if your life is stressful, and so you want to go back to sleep. So it was an interesting thing, thinking, how can I recognize I'm awake and feel good about that fact, even if afterwards day's going to be chaos, or I have to do things I'm not looking forward to or whatever. But in that one moment, can I have gratitude would be a better word than joy, I think. It's more grateful that I'm aware that I'm breathing one more day. Yeah, it's interesting though.
I'm letting it soak in for a second. It is right up my alley in terms of, that old saying is, life is not about how many breaths you take, but how many times your breath is taken away, or how many moments take your breath away. And
Yeah, and it's funny, like, when John passed, the it was almost 3 weeks of waking up after he had passed. He was so important and brought so much value into my life, and I'd wake up and remember that he was gone, that he had transitioned, and I would smile and say, "Oh, John." And then later, like the first week, I cried a lot, and I had a lot of grief, and gusts of that. But in
sure.
that moment, it was always this gratitude for our time together, and it's such an interesting, is a really interesting moment. It's like almost pure because all the noise hasn't quite crept in yet. So yeah, I think you'd have a lot of fun experimenting with it. It's very interesting.
Well, can I task you with reminding me each time we see each other, and just ask me how I'm doing with noticing I'm awake?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I do
There's
want to throw in. I recently heard like a neuroscientist pointing out just something subtle, like you're not lying asleep, and suddenly you say to yourself, "I think I'll open my eyes now." It
Mm,
just happens, and you don't know what is the
yeah,
catalyst making you open your eyes. So then you
yeah,
know.
yeah.
and it just kind of, again, reinforces the whole notion of that life isn't in the moments that you do things, it's in the moments where you have great questions, like the best questions about what just happened. What does this mean to me? Who I am right now is a mystery, and I kind of like it, that whole thing. And my share on joy is these two little men that I'm going to be spending 10 days with in Colorado, 2.5 weeks from now. We're going out to see my grandsons, and just thinking about them, we have this game that we play together called How Many Times Does It Take for Us to Have These Nonverbal Looks back and forth before all of us just break up in laughter.
That's awesome.
And their job is to really make grandpa work hard at it. So when they break down and start with the guffawing and the giggling and all the rest of that stuff, um, it gives me goosebumps thinking about it, and that is pure joy in the moment, and that's a joy I can recreate just by telling you about it anytime I want to. So here we are, and I would like to make it available if anybody has any parting words. We're having a makeup session here because we haven't done this for a minute, but I'm so glad we did it today. You all are remarkable human beings, and I appreciate you and I love you.
I'm good.
That was a nice pause for Eric. Leave that in there, Eric. Don't you dare touch that pause. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Have a great one. And you at home, thank you for tuning in to Lighting the Candle, A World That Works. And we're going to be available now and into the future on all of your favorite podcast platforms. And thanks for tuning us in. We do love you, and we do want to be your partner in getting through this tough time. We can do this together, can't we?
Mhm.
Yes, indeed.
And let's
Yeah.
be stronger and more loving coming out the other side. And let's be connected to that flow of love that Ken's talking about. Let's just really get in touch with that. All right. Bye-bye for now, ladies and gentlemen.
Have a good
Bye-bye.
week. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, A World That Works, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can catch us each week, as well as the rest of the network, at exvadio.com/podcasts, as well as the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.